The blizzard had swallowed the road hours ago, turning the forest into a white tunnel where sound died and direction lied, and it was there, between the scream of the wind and the ache of old memories, that Daniel Cross first saw them. He had pulled his rusted red pickup to the shoulder, engine idling, German shepherd steady at his side, because instinct never really leaves a man who once survived on it. Years after leaving the Navy SEALs, Daniel still felt danger before he saw it, and that night danger wore the shape of exhaustion and grief. A woman stumbled forward through the snow, clutching a bundled infant so tightly her arms shook, 4 children clinging to her coat like roots fighting a flood. Daniel watched for a moment, measuring distance, reading posture, recognizing the telltale signs of people who had gone past fear into survival. He remembered other storms, other missions, the way cold stripped life down to its rawest truth. He stepped out, snow biting his face, and raised one gloved hand, not in command but in calm. The woman froze, eyes sharp with a widow's caution, calculating threat and hope in the same breath. Daniel spoke softly, words barely carrying in the wind, and when she didn't move, he took a step back, showing empty hands, letting the dog sit. He saw the children then, how one tried to be brave, how another hid tears in a sleeve, how the smallest shook uncontrollably. Something in Daniel cracked open, the part he thought he'd buried with his uniform. He told her his name, said nothing of medals or missions, only that the storm would get worse and the road would kill them if they stayed. When she asked why he cared, her voice raw, he answered with the only truth he had left, because no one should be alone out here. And as the wind howled like it meant to erase them all, Daniel Cross made a promise he hadn't planned to keep, not yet knowing that this moment would change every life standing on that frozen road. If this beginning already has you leaning in, remember to subscribe, because stories like this don't end where you expect. Her name was Sarah, and she followed Daniel not because she trusted him, but because the storm trusted no one. Each step toward the truck felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross, yet the children moved faster when they saw the open door, warmth spilling out like a miracle. Daniel lifted the infant with practiced care, surprised at how natural it felt, how the baby's quiet breath slowed his own racing pulse. Inside the cab, the windows fogged. The heater groaned, and for the first time in hours, the children stopped shaking. Sarah's eyes never left Daniel, watching for the smallest sign of danger, but all she saw was a man who checked the doors twice, who wrapped his spare jacket around the oldest girl, who spoke to the dog like an old friend. As the truck crawled forward through the whiteout, Sarah told him pieces of her story, not all at once, never in order. Her husband had died the previous winter in an accident that left more questions than answers, and the town that once felt safe had grown sharp with pity and thin with help. Tonight the power had gone out. The roads closed, and a decision made too late had put them walking into the storm. Daniel listened without interruption, the way he'd been trained to listen on missions where every detail mattered. He told her he lived off-grid now, a cabin a few miles ahead, stocked for winters like this, built for solitude but open to anyone who needed it. When Sarah asked what he wanted in return, Daniel glanced at the children in the rearview mirror and said nothing, because wanting something was exactly what had once cost him everything. The truck finally reached the cabin, lights glowing against the snow like a lighthouse, and as they stepped inside, warmth and silence wrapped around them. The children stared at the simple safety of it all, and Sarah's knees nearly gave out. Daniel made soup, dried coats, and laid blankets by the fire, moving with the quiet efficiency of a man who knew chaos intimately and refused to let it win tonight. And as the storm raged on outside, something else began inside that cabin, a fragile, dangerous thing called hope. Stay with us and subscribe, because hope has a way of testing itself in the chapters ahead. Chapter 3. The night stretched long, and with it came truths neither of them had planned to share. The children slept in a pile of blankets near the fire, the baby breathing softly against Sarah's chest. And Daniel sat across from her, shadows dancing over the scars he never talked about. She asked about the dog first, an easy question, and Daniel smiled faintly as he spoke of loyalty, of trust earned in silence. Then she asked about the way he moved, the way his eyes tracked windows and doors. And Daniel knew there was no point in lying. He told her about the teams, the missions, the choices that never really end when the war does. He told her about the night he came home and realized he didn't know how to live without orders, without danger. Sarah listened the way widows do, without flinching, without trying to fix what can't be fixed. In return, she told him about loneliness that echoed even in a house full of children, about strength that gets mistaken for invincibility, about the quiet terror of wondering how long love can last after loss. The fire burned low, and outside the storm began to ease. But inside the cabin, something heavy settled between them. Not romance. Not yet, but recognition. By morning, the road would reopen, and Sarah would have to decide whether safety meant leaving or staying. Daniel understood that choice better than most. Sometimes survival meant walking away. When dawn finally came, pale and uncertain, Sarah stood at the window, children gathered around her, and asked Daniel what he would do if he were her. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I'd choose the place where fear has the least power." It wasn't an invitation. It was respect. And when Sarah turned from the window with tears, she didn't bother hiding. Daniel knew the storm hadn't been the hardest thing they'd face. If this chapter resonates with you, subscribe now, because the bravest decisions are still to come. The road reopened by noon, plows carving black lines through the white, and Sarah packed slowly, each folded blanket feeling heavier than it should. The children lingered, reluctant to leave the warmth, the dog's steady presence, the strange sense that they had stepped into a pause where the world finally made sense. Daniel stood outside, clearing snow, giving her space, because real strength knows when not to push. When she finally approached him, baby in her arms, she asked the question that had been waiting since the moment he first said, "Come with me." She asked if help always came with a price. Daniel met her gaze and shook his head. He said some things were offered simply because someone once needed the same mercy and survived because of it. Sarah nodded, understanding more than he knew. She didn't ask him to come with them. She didn't ask him to stay. Instead, she asked if they could come back to visit, to learn, to breathe where fear felt smaller. Daniel smiled, the kind of smile that starts as a crack and turns into light, and said the cabin would always be open. As the truck pulled away later, Daniel watched until it disappeared into the trees, the dog pressing against his leg. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like punishment. Weeks later, footprints returned to the cabin, laughter echoing where gunfire once lived. And Daniel realized that rescue doesn't always look like saving someone. It sometimes looks like being ready when they arrive. And as the forest settled into another winter, 5 lives and 1 quiet guardian rewrote what survival meant together. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the power of kindness in the coldest moments, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the next story might be the one you didn't know you needed.